The time I became a hill from millions of years. A Salvia trip report sent in by a subscriber. Setting the scene. Reading Festival, early 2000s. It was the summer of 2003, and the Reading Festival was a glorious gritty chaos, a muddy playground for 100,000 music fans, weirdos, and thrill-seekers. The air crackled with energy, thick with the stench of cheap lager, dank weed, and sizzling festival grub, all pulsing to the far-off rumble of guitars from the main stage. My mates, B and D, and I had rocked up with a backpack crammed with gear and one mission: to get properly smashed. This was the early 2000s, the Wild West of legal highs. Mushrooms, salvia, and all sorts of bizarre herbal mixes were flogged openly at stalls, no questions asked. I was no rookie, a hardened drug user in fact. I'd racked up countless trips on weed, shrooms, and other party drugs, chasing the outer limits of my mind with a smirk. We were young, cocky, and up for anything. We spent the first morning slinging hash to boost our festival funds, and by midday we were sorted with cash. Hash gone, we roamed the sprawling market stalls, weaving through tie-dye drapes, incense fog, and vendors pushing everything from glow sticks to instant nirvana. The vibe was pure adrenaline. Everyone was after their own slice of transcendence, whether through music, drugs, or both. B was banging on about scoring some pills, D was eyeing a kebab stand, and I was just riding the wave, ready for whatever the weekend chucked at us. Then we hit the stall. A wonky setup cloaked in psychedelic cloth, manned by a skinny bloke with a sly grin and eyes that twinkled with secrets. His table was a treasure trove of head spinners, dried shrooms, herbal powders, and tiny vials with names that sounded like they belonged in a wizard's lab. We grabbed a bag of shrooms, the standard festival fuel. But the shopkeeper wasn't done. He leaned in, holding up a small glass vial of dark green powder. "Salvia divinorum 20x extract," he said, his voice dripping with promise. "This'll turn you out of this reality, mate. Nothing like your usual trips." I snorted. 40 quid for a vial of dust, and it's legal? "Mate, I've smoked and necked enough to know what's what," I fired back. "No chance it's that mad if you're selling it over the counter." I'd danced with psychedelics for years. Weed, shrooms, and club drugs were my turf. This sounded like a sales pitch of sorts. The shopkeeper's grin stretched wider. "Alright then, big man," he said, sliding a sleek black hash pipe across the table, its surface etched with a coiled dragon. "Buy the salvia and this pipe's yours. Free. But you gotta smoke it right here, right now, and let me watch. Deal?" Well, I never backed down from a challenge. I slapped the cash down and said, "You're on." The setup. A crowd, a vial, and a leap into the abyss. We flopped onto the grass in front of the stall, the festival's madness swirling around us. People cackling, shouting, tripping over in a blur of neon wristbands and glitter. B and D sat beside me. B grinning like he was in on the gag. D looking a bit uneasy. The shopkeeper handed me the vial of salvia, no pre-packed bowl, no poncho nonsense, just the raw green powder and a nod. "Fill it yourself," he said, his tone suddenly grave. "Big hit. Hold it in for 30 seconds and don't fight it. Let it take you." I tipped the vial's contents into the pipe. The salvia's sharp, earthy smell hitting my nose like a warning. The pipe felt heavy, the dragon etching catching the sun's glare. I glanced at B, who gave a cheeky nod, and D, who just shrugged. "Go on then," B said. With a bit of swagger, I sparked the lighter, packed the bowl tight, and took a massive hit, holding it in like I was born for this very moment. The smoke scorched my lungs, bitter and thick, but I counted to 30, locking eyes with the shopkeeper like I'd already won. I exhaled, and the world broke. The trip. A hill, a void, and a million-year nightmare. It hit me like a freight train. Pins and needles, not just on my skin, but through me, like my entire being was being stabbed by 1,000 tiny sparks. My vision warped, the festival's colours melting into a fractal hurricane. Then, with a sound like tearing fabric, reality split. The seams of my hoodie, right along my arm, began to unravel, threads peeling back to reveal something impossible. Inside my arm wasn't flesh or bone, it was a tiny factory. 3 or 4 elf-like creatures with jagged faces and eyes like polished obsidian worked a glowing conveyor belt, hammering at something. The movements were mechanical, otherworldly. One of them had stopped. It turned slowly and looked at me. That stare. It wasn't curious, it was like I'd gatecrashed their dimension. The others froze, their heads snapping towards me in sync. Before I could process it, a force, like gravity, cranked to 1,000, slammed me downward. My body dissolved, my sense of self shattered, and I was gone. Words can't touch what came next, but I will try. Well, I wasn't at the festival. I wasn't even human. I was a hill. A vast, endless hill sprawled across a barren plain under a sky that pulsed with colours no human eye could name. Time wasn't a line, it was a smear, an eternity. I knew I'd been this hill for millions of years, and I'd be this hill for millions more. Wind carved my slopes. Rain eroded my edges and I was trapped, conscious but immobile, unable to scream or escape. It was the most terrifying thought I had ever had. Not pain, not death, but forever as a mute, sentient lump of earth. A tiny fragment of my mind, maybe 0.01%, clung to doubt. Wait, it whispered. I had a body, didn't I? Arms, legs, a voice? I latched onto that thought and a worse horror hit. I realised my body had been worn away by eons of wind and rain, leaving only my eyes, floating, disembodied, doomed to stare at the void forever. Panic surged, a silent scream in a formless abyss. Then, somehow, I felt it. My ponytail. A lifeline. I don't know how, but I grabbed it with no hands and pulled. Reality lurched. The loop. Rewind, replay, repeat. I snapped back to the festival, but it wasn't over. I was on the grass, B&D staring at me, their faces a mix of shock and worry. B muttered something gibberish like, na 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 na, and D said, 23 pence. His voice, soft, almost hypnotic. My eyes locked onto an empty beer can on the ground, glinting in the sun. Then, like a VHS tape rewinding, the scene reset. B's nonsense, D's 23 pence. The beer can. Again. And again. I was trapped in a loop. Each cycle identical, each one drowning me in a déjà vu. It repeated 15, maybe 20 times. Each iteration grinding my sense of reality to dust. On the final loop, a spark of defiance flared. Break it, I thought. Break it. As the beer can appeared, I lunged, grabbed it, and hurled it into the crowd. The loop rewound, but this time it replayed with me throwing the can. The cycle shattered. I stood up, heart pounding, and just like that, I was back. Stone cold sober, like I could have driven home. The festival roared on, oblivious to the eternity that I had just endured. B and D were pale as ghosts. Mate, B stammered. You started shaking like you're having a fit. D nodded. 3 minutes maybe. We actually thought you were gone. 3 minutes? I'd lived millions of years as a hill, seen elves in my arm and been stuck in a time loop. I turned to the shopkeeper who was leaning against his stall, smirking like he'd seen it all before. Told you, he said. Another dimension. I stumbled back to his stall, half dazed, and begged him to buy the Salvia back. He laughed, shaking his head. That's when I saw the packaging. The 5x, 10x, and 15x extracts had long warnings. Use in a safe environment, have a sitter, no sharp objects, don't mix with other drugs. The 20x? Just one line, in bold black. Are you mad? Aftermath, 20 years later. It's been over 2 decades, and I'm still untangling what happened. Was it real? The elves, the hill, the loop? They felt more vivid than this world I'm in right now. I've scoured trip reports on Erowid, Reddit, and forums since, finding others who've met entities, felt time dissolve, or been trapped in loops. Salvia doesn't just twist your mind, it flings you into a reality we're not built to process. A reality that might be truer than we're ready to face. The lesson? Well, Salvia is not a toy, and it's not for festivals or dares. It's a portal to places we are not meant to go. If you are ever at a festival, facing a grinning vendor with a vial of 20x, maybe, just maybe, keep walking. A massive thanks to the subscriber who sent me this via my email. One of the best reports I've had personally submitted to me in quite a while. I find reports like these really interesting when they're in festival type scenarios because I myself have gone into the beyond and whatever is beyond the beyond at Leeds Festival I went there in 2016, 2017, 2018. Yes, I went 3 years in a row. Truly some of the weirdest experiences I've ever had in my life were at those festivals. Nothing of this caliber. Smoking Salvia at a festival is pretty hardcore, to be honest, but I had many sort of reality defying experiences from interesting shopkeeper type personalities in the vein of the person that the subscriber met here. I remember one time I was at Leeds, I think it was in 2016, and there was a guy who was selling ketamine and acid, or what he purported was ketamine and acid. It actually wasn't at all. Still to this day I have absolutely no idea what it was. It was some form of dissociative, similar to ketamine, but not really, had this weird trippier element to it, and it was in rocks, it wasn't in shards, much like ketamine is, and the acid that he sold us was not acid at all, it was some form of N-bomb. You could taste it, the numbing, the metallic taste on your tongue. It wasn't acid whatsoever, and because I guess we was all teenagers and desperate to imbue the Leeds Festival with more magic than it possessed. I mean, festivals are pretty magic, and Leeds' festival is pretty magic, but definitely very commercialised. But you know, that's just how it is when you go to these festivals that massive bands and massive artists play at, and they're more corporate. But regardless, anyway, we was just in that sort of mind frame. We was teenagers. We was wanting to go into the beyond, do some crazy stuff, as we all do, and we was mixing the dino ket as we coined it, because you get rhino ket, which is a colloquial term for MXE. We called whatever this type of ketamine analog that we found was, we called it Dino Ket, and we mixed it with the 25i, and we was going serious places. And many people went into loops. So I remember my mate, me and my friend, I'll call him L, went off exploring the festival. There's the Relentless stage. If any of you have ever been to Leeds Festival, it's in the campground, and where they play more of like the electronic music, lots of DJs. I think Endor was on, and we was noticing everything looping on this 25i or 25. I'm going to call it 25i because it was, or an M-bomb. It was on an M-bomb, a one tab. I think my mate took more, and yeah, I was on an M-bomb. He was as well, and we was consuming this Dino Ket, as we called it, and we noticed that everybody was sort of like looping around and around and around. Everyone was sort of literally just like rotating like cogs in like clockwork, and it was really messing with my sanity, to be honest. I had no perception of a normal reality. I felt like I was in some form of dream world. And then as we was just going on our adventures, because me and him, the fact that we was both in sync, we were both sort of losing our minds in conjunction with each other, made it a lot more comfortable. Because if I was by myself, I probably would have lost it, and vice versa for him. And we were just wandering around trying to find our camp. We had no idea where we were. Phones was off, and even if your phones were on, you still can't get data or signal or anything. And what is a phone? What even is a phone to you when you're in that sort of state of mind? Literally just nothingness. You can't even work it. So was walking around trying to find our camp. Went up to one of the members of staff and we asked him where. I think we was in Blue Camp. Was it Blue? Yeah, Blue Camp, I believe. And he was like, yeah, sorry to break it to you, lads. You're about half a mile out. It's about 30 minutes over there. And we'd walked the complete wrong way. We'd been going the complete opposite direction. So that was just hilarious. We was laughing the whole time. It was completely ridiculous. The insanity. God, some of the things you get up to when you're that age. I was like, I think I was 19, 19, I believe. And yes, we eventually made it back to our camp, and I thought I was perceiving people on a loop, and we thought we were on a loop, me and Elle. And then we got back, and my mate H, he was literally doing a dance round the campfire. We had a huge group. There was loads of us that went to Leeds Festival for them 3 years on the trot, and they was all having their own weird little experience on the Dino Ket meets M-bomb mixture. And my mate H was dancing around the fire, just doing like this little jig with his arms spread out wide, sort of like gyrating his hips, and then kept going over and over and over again. Ha ha ha, yes lad. Ha ha ha, yes lad. Ha ha ha, yes lad. Over and over and over and over again. So bizarre, mate. Honestly, one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. We always bring it up to this day. I was like, how the hell did you not end up going to some form of psych ward after that? Because I thought he was going to be on a loop forever. It was very, very bizarre. Honestly, just a glimpse of insanity. My first real glimpse of insanity when I went to Leeds Festival in 2016. But this, my God, I hope you, the subscriber, I'm sure you're listening to this back, I hope that you've managed to sort of untangle this experience and integrate it in some way, shape or form, because I can't even fathom what that's like to live as a hill for what feels like millions of years. And obviously many people are like, well, that's literally impossible. How did he live as a hill for millions of years? It's completely fake. But the thing is, these substances like Salvia, they're not like it's not like taking acid, it's not like taking shrooms or a dissociative or anything else. This is like some serious alien business right here. This is stepping into a dimension of existence that is so unfathomably inhuman that scenarios like these are very much given a reality to be experienced in the Salvia state of consciousness. The amount of reports that are similar to this, where people experience life as just something else, oftentimes something inhuman like an object, or something organic like a hill or a rock, or anything that's just doesn't have like human components to it. This seems to be a through line between many of the really out there Salvia reports. And you don't even need to read reports. I've met people in real life who've had experiences like these on Salvia. I used to work with a man at a certain place, keep it anonymous, and he told me after he found out about Vivec, I was telling him about it. He thought it was really interesting. And he said he grew up in Manchester, and because obviously growing up on a council estate, everyone just sort of wants to do wacky stuff, I guess, and it seems to be a common ambition to grow up on a council estate and just batter your mind with substances. I mean, I completely relate to that. I know how it is. And him and his mates had a Salvia source. I believe maybe it was a head shop. This must have happened in like the early 90s, maybe late 80s or something. And he doesn't know the exact amount or the extract or anything, because I obviously asked him if he knew any of the details. All he knew is that he got some Salvia off some guy with his mates, and they went and smoked it in the park like you do, Devo style, through a little plastic bong in a Coke bottle. And yes, they smoked it, and the other three had like your generic Salvia low dose experience, a bit like I had, where it was like just laughing to the nth degree, to the point where it almost hurts, getting a slight sense of weirdness to you, but anything really out there. But him, the guy who spoke to me about this, he had an experience of literally entering another dimension where he actually met his dead grandmother, and he was talking to her like as if she was as living as his mates right next to him. And he was in some weird sort of like a pocket reality, where he was almost like, you'd say like the Red Room or something in Twin Peaks, where it's like a pocket dimension where it was a room and his grandma was sat there at some sort of like office table, and he was speaking to her, and she was telling him that everything's going to be alright, she's always watching over him, he's going to make the most of his life, and that this experience right now is just all part of his life's journey to achieving his dreams, the dream life that he envisioned for himself before he was born. So yeah, that's absolutely mental. That you would have never realised this just observing this guy. You would have never thought he would have had that experience. And it's so fascinating when you just sit down with people and get to know them, and you find out that many people you might observe from a distance, just when you're walking around in reality, and think, oh, there's no way anyone's experienced this. Sometimes psychonauts, I think, can feel like this, like they can feel a bit alone in their crazy mystical experiences, when actually a lot of people, if you sit down and talk to them, have had some really insane paranormal, supernatural type of experiences, regardless of whether they were taking substances or not. It just shows you that you should take the time to sit down and speak to people, especially if you have a bit of a calling towards them. If you notice yourself like subconsciously gravitating towards their energy, oftentimes you are meant to meet and discuss the fringe type experiences that many of us have been thrust into during this journey of life that we all are embarking on together. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this report and the commentary section. I'm going to make a more concerted effort to share more of my direct submissions in my emails, take a break from the Era with Trip reports. I just love the Era with Trip reports, I'm not going to lie. I've just been sort of archiving a lot of the reports that people have been sending me over the years to eventually get round to them in bulk, and I think that's what I'm going to do now. Go through many of the ones that have been littering my emails over the years and years I've been doing Vivec, which is just pretty insane to me that I've even been doing Vivec for years, because for many of you that know, Vivec is it's like the second chapter of my YouTube journey. My first chapter was Colonel Cubbage, that was what the channel was called, when I did Attack on Titan Abridged and Minecraft Let's Plays and all the other autistic shenanigans that you involve yourself with when you're in the early 2010s. So yeah, anyway, look forward to that, and hope you all have a good weekend. Stay safe, stay wise, and don't play with feathers or you will get your arse tickled.